Welcome to another deep dive into the source material. We're incredibly glad you're here.
Absolutely.
And when we say you, we are talking directly to you, the learner,
Right.
the professional who's constantly refining their mental toolkit. Whether you're, stepping into a high-stakes strategy role or trying to untangle a deeply dysfunctional team dynamic.
Or maybe you just want a better framework for understanding the friction in your daily workflow.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So today's mission is highly focused.
Hmm.
We're looking at a pretty fascinating training manual. It's titled Problem-Solving Techniques.
Yeah, developed for the Supervisory Skills Development Program at Fubaya Mining, or PBM.
Right. And the core objective of this material is to completely shift how you approach operational friction, moving you away from that adrenaline-fueled cycle of temporary quick fixes and toward architectures that create permanent systemic results.
That framing is really crucial because the manual starts with a very grounding premise. Problems are not anomalies.
Right. They're just part of the job.
Exactly. Things going wrong, systems breaking down, processes losing efficiency. That is just the baseline reality of operating any organization.
Yeah.
It's easy to internalize operational failure as a personal leadership failure, but this material treats problems simply as gaps between what is happening and what should be happening.
I love that perspective.
It is. Effective problem solving isn't an innate personality trait. It's a highly structural, learnable skill. It requires a specific methodology to bridge that gap without creating 3 new problems in the process.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because right out of the gate, the manual draws a hard line between fixing a problem and solving a problem.
Yes.
And conceptually, they're entirely different operational strategies.
Yeah.
Fixing is reactionary, right? It's the immediate application of a patch just to stop the bleeding.
And the issue there is that a fix only masks the symptom for a brief window.
Right, like you tape the leaking pipe so you can get through the afternoon shift, but the structural integrity of the pipe is still compromised.
Exactly. Solving the problem, on the other hand, means hunting down the root cause and engineering a long-term resolution.
Which takes time.
It does. The material is very transparent that solving takes significantly more thought, effort, and patience up front, which is exactly why most organizations default to just fixing things until the whole system collapses.
Yeah, that default to fixing is often a product of corporate incentive structures, isn't it? Managers are frequently rewarded for making a problem temporarily disappear before the end of the quarter.
Oh, 100%. But true problem solving, the kind expected of highly effective leaders, demands a completely different mindset. You have to be willing to sit with the friction long enough to really understand it.
Right.
Because problem solving is a formalized skill. It means it can be audited, practiced, and scaled across a team. You aren't just relying on the smartest person in the room to have a light bulb moment.
You're relying on a systematic process that anyone can execute if they have the discipline to follow it.
Exactly.
Knowing that, I want you, the listener, to mentally isolate a recurring headache you're dealing with at work right now. Something that constantly requires your intervention, a bottleneck that never seems to clear, or a metric that stubbornly refuses to improve. Keep that specific issue in mind, because we're going to walk through a framework to systematically dismantle it.
But before we get to the methodology, the manual forces us to look at the human element.
Oh, this is my favorite part. It categorizes decision makers into 5 distinct personas,
Right.
essentially outlining a menagerie of archetypes that dictate how problems are handled under stress.
Let's look at the 4 anti-role models first.
Right, starting with a persona they call the gun. This is the operator who sees a problem and immediately deploys the absolute first solution that crosses their mind.
The danger of the gun isn't just the impulsivity, it's the massive collateral damage they cause. By grabbing the first available solution, the gun completely bypasses any analysis of secondary or tertiary consequences.
They aren't mapping out how their unilateral decision impacts the supply chain, the finance department, or team morale down the line.
No, they aren't. In the short term, this persona often gets praised. They look highly decisive, they project confidence, and they give the illusion of momentum.
But structurally, their quick fixes act like technical debt.
Exactly, guaranteeing that a much more complex, deeply entangled problem will detonate in the future.
So the real threat of the gun is that their decisiveness is actually just a refusal to engage with complexity.
Spot on.
Now, the polar opposite of that is a persona called the snail. This is the leader who refuses to pull the trigger on even the most trivial operational decisions. Their prerequisite for action is having every single piece of data, every conceivable fact, and zero ambiguity before they move.
Which in any functional business environment is a mathematical impossibility.
Right, you'll never operate with perfect information. Business moves at 80% certainty.
Exactly. Because the snail refuses to act without absolute guarantees, they induce total operational paralysis. The window of opportunity to actually mitigate the problem closes while they are still waiting on a final risk assessment report.
For the team reporting to a snail, this is arguably more toxic than working for a gun.
I would agree. A bad decision can at least be corrected. A relentless refusal to make any decision breeds deep organizational apathy and endless frustration.
That paralysis by analysis leads us right into the third archetype, the frightened rabbit.
Right.
This persona isn't paralyzed by a lack of data. They're paralyzed by the fear of interpersonal friction. They navigate problem-solving purely through the lens of conflict avoidance, constantly trying to engineer solutions that will prevent anyone from getting upset.
And if your primary objective is keeping everyone comfortable, your secondary objective is actually solving the problem. The frightened rabbit defaults to weak compromises.
They water down the necessary interventions so severely that the root cause remains completely untouched.
Precisely. A solution designed by committee simply to appease competing egos almost never moves the needle. It's a fundamental misreading of leadership.
Resolving complex problems naturally creates temporary discomfort. It requires someone to change their workflow. By refusing to step on any toes, the rabbit ensures the core dysfunction remains intact.
It's essentially choosing superficial harmony over actual functionality.
Now, the fourth anti-role model is perhaps the most insidious because they disguise their avoidance as intense labor. The manual calls this persona the worrier. Unlike the snail or the rabbit, the worrier looks incredibly busy. They're constantly shuffling papers, calling unnecessary alignment meetings, reorganizing spreadsheets, and loudly signaling to the broader office that they're deep in the weeds of the problem.
But it's entirely an illusion of productivity. It's the weaponization of motion to avoid taking action.
Wow, weaponization of motion.
The worrier uses busyness as an impenetrable shield. As long as they are conspicuously overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data they're analyzing, no one can accuse them of ignoring the issue.
But they never actually execute a decision.
Never. They just manage the optics of being involved. And if they are eventually forced into a corner to make a call, it's usually so late in the cycle that the damage is already done, leaving their colleagues to clean up a completely preventable mess.
I am certain everyone listening has already assigned these four personas to various executives or colleagues in their own organization.
Oh, without a doubt.
But the goal is to embody the fifth persona, the skilled decision maker. This is the target state. This leader spots systemic degradation early, intervening before a manageable issue metastasizes into a crisis.
They gather the necessary facts, not all of them, just the high-signal data. They map out multiple viable interventions, and they execute the most optimal one with clear intent.
Right.
What's fascinating here is that cognitive under pressure makes fools of us all.
How so?
Well, we might possess the baseline traits of a skilled decision maker during a quiet Tuesday morning strategy block. But when a critical project goes off the rails on a Friday afternoon and the board is demanding answers, stress fundamentally alters our operating system.
Oh, absolutely.
A calm, analytical leader can instantly revert into a gun just to clear the cognitive load, or become a frightened rabbit to avoid taking the blame. That is precisely why you cannot rely on personality to solve problems.
You need a rigid external framework to tether yourself to when the pressure spikes and your instincts betray you.
Exactly.
And the manual provides that exact tether with a framework they call the ABCs of problem solving. It's a highly structured workflow designed to force you out of reactionary habits.
It breaks down into 3 distinct phases.
Right. A is explore the problem, B is search for solutions, and C is implement and assess. But the manual doesn't just list these steps, it explores the specific mechanics of why each one is critical.
Phase A, exploring the problem, forces you to ask what is actually wrong and why.
Which means you have to clearly define the reality of the problem, determine the exact result you need, and isolate the root causes before you even think about proposing a fix.
That phase is where most organizational failures occur. Teams want to jump straight to Phase B, searching for solutions, because brainstorming feels productive and action-oriented.
Exploring the problem is tedious.
It is. It requires admitting you don't fully understand the current state of affairs. But if you bypass the deep exploration of Phase A, your solutions in Phase B are entirely speculative. You're just throwing resources at symptoms.
And Phase C, implementation, also carries a critical caveat. It includes assessment.
Right. You don't just execute the change and move on. You have to establish feedback loops to verify that the systemic friction has actually been eliminated.
So what does this all mean when the pressure is actually on and the building is metaphorically on fire? How do you force a team to stay in Phase A and explore the problem when every instinct is screaming to just implement a quick fix?
The manual points out that the single biggest trap in Phase A is accepting vague problem statements.
Like the example they use. If a site manager walks into a meeting and says, "We are having way too many injuries on site," the natural reaction is to immediately mandate more safety training.
But as a problem statement, too many injuries is completely unactionable. It's an observation, not a diagnosis.
You can't engineer a solution for a vague observation.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
To move from observation to diagnosis, you have to ruthlessly interrogate the statement. You need high-resolution data. Are these lacerations, blunt force traumas, or chemical burns?
Are they clustered in the maintenance bay or out on the transport roads?
Are they happening during the final hour of a 12-hour shift when fatigue peaks? Until you segment the vague statement into highly specific, measurable categories, any solution you deploy is just a guess.
To force that segmentation, the manual relies heavily on Pareto analysis. Now, you don't need a primer on what a Pareto chart looks like. You understand the 80-20 principle.
Right, the 80% line.
But what I found fascinating is how aggressively this training manual uses Pareto to strip away emotional bias and force brutal prioritization. It actually steps outside of the mining context for a moment to demonstrate how universal the tool is, using a data set on marriage failures.
It's a brilliant example.
It really is. If you survey 1,000 divorced couples, the anecdotal reasons for the split would seem infinitely complex and entirely unique to each relationship. But when you apply a Pareto analysis to the raw data, the complexity collapses.
The insight there is profound. Out of those 1,000 couples, the data reveals that just two categories, lack of communication and financial stress, account for 70% of all the failures.
Let me grab the exact numbers from the source. Out of 1,000 couples, 500 cited lack of communication.
And half of them.
Yeah. And 200 cited lack of money, which dwarfs the rest. Children was 100, other relationships at 80, work at 60, clash of values at 40, and other at 20.
Everything else is just a statistical outlier by comparison. If you're operating a family counseling practice with limited resources, the Pareto principle dictates that you do not build your core curriculum around resolving value clashes.
Right.
You heavily over-index on communication and financial literacy. The analysis forces you to ignore the noise and direct your capital where the systemic failure is actually concentrated.
The manual then transitions that exact same logic into a corporate scenario. Employee turnover.
Yes, looking at 43 resignations over a single quarter.
Right. And again, exit interviews generate a massive spectrum of complaints, from the quality of the on-site accommodation to conflicts with shift supervisors. But when mapped out, over half of those 43 resignations stem from just two highly specific reasons.
Better career opportunity elsewhere and unhappy with the work.
Exactly. Better career opportunity had 13 people, and unhappy with the work had 12. That's 25 out of 43 right there. Contrast this with minor issues like conflict, which was only 1 resignation, or accommodation, which was 2.
Which completely shifts the strategic response.
Completely.
If the HR department operates on anecdote rather than data, they might hear 3 loud complaints about the fly-in, fly-out schedule and spend their entire quarterly budget restructuring the travel logistics.
But the data proves that FIFO schedules are barely a blip on the radar. The Pareto analysis tells the executive team that their retention strategy needs to focus entirely on internal career mapping and job enrichment.
Fixing the accommodation or the travel schedule might make a few people slightly more comfortable, but it won't solve the actual turnover crisis. You have to attack the bars on the far left of the chart.
And the stakes get exponentially higher when the manual applies Pareto to the initial vague problem, workplace injuries.
Right, looking at 40 total incidents over 3 months.
The distribution is aggressively skewed. Out of 40 injuries, ladder and fall injuries were 18. That's 45% of the total.
Almost half.
Yeah. And back injuries were 8, so 20%. Those two categories are the massive priorities compared to eye injuries, which had 5, or cut injuries, which only had 2.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it highlights the danger of the frightened rabbit or the warrior in a leadership role.
How so?
A weak leader will launch a generalized safety awareness campaign, trying to address chemical handling, floor signage, and cutting protocols all at once just to show they're busy addressing the whole board.
Right, trying to please everyone.
Exactly. But the skilled decision maker looks at that Pareto distribution and ruthlessly cuts the generalized campaign. They realize that if they can completely engineer ladder falls out of the daily workflow, perhaps by replacing ladders with mobile elevated work platforms, they instantly reduce the total accident rate by 45%.
Prioritization requires ignoring the minor problems, which can be politically difficult. But it is the only way to achieve systemic impact. The Pareto analysis cuts through the noise and isolates the specific battle you need to fight. But isolating the problem isn't the same as defining the objective.
No, it's not.
Once we know ladder falls are the true crisis, Phase A requires us to set a highly specific aim. The manual is rigorous about this phrasing. You can't say your aim is to make ladders safer.
That's another vague statement that cannot be audited.
Exactly. The aim must be binary and measurable. The manual defines the aim in this example as no people falling off or getting hurt when using ladders so that the number of accidents happening on site is reduced by 45%.
That formulation does two things. First, it establishes a definitive metric for success. Second, it fundamentally changes the scope of the solution you are looking for.
Right.
If your aim is just safer ladders, you might just buy ladders with better grips. If your aim is zero falls, you might redesign the storage facility so that materials are no longer kept at height in the first place, completely removing the need for a ladder.
But even with a clear problem and a precise aim, you still have to map out the underlying pathology of the issue before moving to Phase B.
You do.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To map out that pathology, the manual brings in the Ishikawa diagram, or the fishbone framework.
Yes.
Again, the value here isn't in drawing a literal diagram. The value is in how the framework forces a team to categorize and visualize the anatomy of a failure.
For those who haven't seen one, the visual is literally like a fish skeleton. The head of the fish is the problem, the effect you're seeing.
Okay.
The bones connecting to the spine are all the small things, the categories of factors that work together to cause it.
The manual uses a highly relatable, high-friction scenario for this. Managers getting frustrated because the office photocopier isn't working properly right when month-end reports need to be printed and distributed.
It is the perfect example of a problem that typically generates an incredibly emotional reactionary response. People get furious at the machine or they blame the IT department.
We've all been there.
The Ishikawa framework diffuses that emotional tension by turning the failure into an engineering puzzle. You place the primary failure, the month-end breakdown, at the head of the fish. And you force the team to trace back every single contributing variable across specific categories along the bones.
So you interrogate the hardware maintenance schedule, but you also interrogate the human operational procedures, the quality of the toner supplies, and the ambient environment of the server room.
It prevents the team from tunneling in on one specific assumption.
Because if you act like the gun, you just assume the machine is old and you spend $30,000 on a new one.
Only to realize the new one jams just as often because the actual root cause was the procurement team buying cheap, out-of-spec paper to save a few cents.
Exactly. The Ishikawa analysis allows a team to visualize every tiny contributing factor to that specific photocopier failure.
Yeah.
It forces you to look at the paper quality, the user training, and the maintenance logs simultaneously.
It ensures you are targeting the actual disease, not just treating a localized symptom. Only when you are absolutely sure of the causes can you truly fix the problem permanently.
It creates a comprehensive causal map.
And once you have that map, combined with the ruthless prioritization of the Pareto analysis, you have successfully completed Phase A. You've fully explored the problem.
And only then are you actually equipped to move into Phase B, generate a targeted list of solutions, and execute Phase C with confidence that you're permanently engineering the friction out of the system.
It is a profound shift from managing chaos to designing structural reliability.
We've covered a massive amount of operational ground today.
We really have.
We started by auditing our own instincts, analyzing the destructive blast radius of the gun,
The paralyzing perfectionism of the snail,
the weak compromises of the frightened rabbit.
and the toxic busyness of the worrier.
We examined the discipline required to fully explore, search, and implement using the ABC framework. We looked at how Pareto analysis cuts through organizational noise to find the highest impact interventions, and how Ishikawa mapping systematically hunts down the true root causes hidden beneath the frustration.
It's a complete toolkit.
So, to you, the learner, looking at your own persistent workplace headaches, what stands out to you? When the pressure inevitably spikes, which decision-maker persona do you default to under stress?
That requires deep, honest reflection. And as you analyze your own default settings, consider this final thought based on everything we've looked at today. We've evaluated these decision-making styles in isolation, but organizations are ecosystems.
Right.
Imagine what happens when a gun and a snail are forced to solve a problem together on the same team.
Oh, wow.
Does their friction create a balanced, skilled decision, or does it completely paralyze the ABC process? Next time you are in a team meeting, look around the room and see if you can spot the dynamic playing out.
What an incredible lens to view your next team meeting through. Thank you all for joining us on this custom deep dive into their sources. We hope you can take these frameworks and start permanently solving the friction in your own environments instead of just applying another fix. Keep analyzing the systems around you, and we will see you on the next deep dive.
It was a pleasure to unpack this with you. Until next time.